with very
Great. Good afternoon, ladies. Yeah, have your attention. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to introduce Catriona Crowe. She is the head of special projects at the National Archives of Ireland. She's manager of the Irish Census Online project, an editor of Documents on Irish Foreign Policy, an editor of Dublin 1911, published by the Royal Irish Academy, vice president of the Irish Labour History Society, and former president of the Women's History Association. She's chairperson of the Irish Theatre Institute, which promotes Irish theatre and has created an award-winning website for Irish theatre productions, which you might want to check out. She's chairperson of an organization called SAIL, a rehabilitation initiative for women with addiction problems based in the inner city of Dublin, and also chairperson of the Inner City Rent Renewal Group, which delivers employment and welfare rights advice and support to the community in North Inner City. And we're thrilled to have her here today to tell us about women and the 1911 census. Thanks.
Well, I'm very delighted to be here today, and it's not to be able to say ladies. I know it's not fashionable to go to sex things these days, but I still value the food, and I think we still need such events. Anyway, it's a great privilege for me to be able to address it today. I didn't know very much about Porco until I looked you up on the internet, and your objectives in terms of education, environment, citizenship, voters' rights, suffrage, all of those things are hugely in tune with my own, and I think it's absolutely great that you're doing so, that you're putting the fantastic energy of American women all over the world into projects that need your help. So it's lovely to be here. Now, how many of you have been in Dublin before? Quite a few. But about half, I would say, so half not. How many of you know anything about Irish history? Well, the reason I'm here today is because I'm one of the people who put our 1901 and 1911 census records online, which has been a big success, largely used for genealogical research, and we'll do a quick little tour to show you how that works in case any of you have American ancestors that you want to check out. But which has also been used for all kinds of other things, because it's a free website. You don't have to pay every time you press a button, and you're able to browse it and mess about it in all kinds of lovely ways. So it's being used by local history societies, by major scholarship initiatives. There's a thing called the North Atlantic Population Project, based in the University of Minnesota, who are aggregating all of the census data from what was the North Atlantic area. It's now expanded into all kinds of places. So they have the Scandinavian countries, they have Britain, they have France, they have North America, Canada, Mexico, ourselves, and they've now extended as far as Egypt, which is very far away from the North Atlantic, but it's still interesting. And what they're doing is putting all this together into a big mash, and I'm not as technologically astute as I ought to be, so I'm not sure how they do it, but if you give them all the data, you can then search across all of these different countries and look at things like social mobility, marriage patterns, child-rearing patterns, all of those kinds of things. And already what they have up is transforming scholarship in these areas and confounding a lot of the theories that we thought we had. So also, of course, at the very other end of the scale, you have school children using the census to do projects in school about history, mainly about their own areas where they live, where they can supplement the information that they get from the census with interviews with their grandparents or people who live in those areas. So it's used in all kinds of ways. Now the shot I have up on the screen behind me here is O'Connell Street in around 1900. This is the capital street of our city. So as you know, there's a wonderful looking yoke there up in the middle called Nelson's Pillar, which used to contain Admiral Horatio Nelson, the hero of Waterloo, which was blown up in 1966. I would say an act of quite extreme evangelism, you know. I know we have trouble with the British and all that, and did have in the past, but it was a gorgeous object, as you can see. Now the spire, which you'll see if you haven't seen out yet, is nice. It looks a bit like a Brancusi, and we like its kind of meaninglessness, I suppose, in this thing. When the pillar was blown up, there were many suggestions as to what should go in its place, and we have records in the National Archives. And one of them involved a 30-metre high statue of the Virgin Mary, which really wouldn't have been a good idea. Others had Lord Pierce, who was one of the heroes of the Revolution, and so on. So it became very contentious and remained a vacant space for quite a long time until the spire was found to satisfy everyone and no one at the same time, and not to cost too much money. So it's a rather beautiful structure. It's more beautiful than it is now. You can see the statue of Daniel O'Connell, beautiful sort of white pistons which are long gone, Dutch at this point. O'Connell Bridge here, the clan system which we had, which we did away with in the 1950s, and which is now returned to us in the form of a great thing called the Lewis. But back in the 1900s, I think we had 60 miles of trams. Now we have much less than that, and it's not effective or efficient. So in some ways we've gone backwards. So Dublin at this point in time is facing, and we say around 1911, is facing into a decade of immense turbulence. We could be facing into a decade of immense turbulence now without knowing it, as people then didn't know it either. In 1912, we have, of course, Dublin at this point in time is the capital city of a country which is part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Scotland, Wales and Ireland, and has been part of the British Empire in the full sense since 1800 in the Act of Union. There's a whole lot of interesting political and cultural things swirling around the country at this point in time, at the end of the 19th century. We had a revival of interest in Gaelic literature, in Gaelic culture, in dance, in the language, in particular the Irish language, which probably at this point has got to the stage where it can no longer viably survive as the first language of the country. It's been worn down pretty severely, but there's huge interest in it. We have people like W.B. Yeats, we've got Lady Gregory, one of the great women in Ireland at this point in time, starting the Abbey Theatre in 1904. We have all of the future revolutionaries, people like Horace Pearse, John McDermott in Kent, Tom Clark, James Connolly, the great hero of Labour in Ireland, all living in the city at this point in time, all meeting with each other, all planning a future for a country that didn't quite know where it was about to go. But of course, at this point in the next year, 1912, we have the setting up of the Ulster Volunteers in the north. And that is done in opposition to the certainty that Home Rule, which would have meant us having dominion status within the British Empire, was going to be certainly introduced very quickly because the veto of it has already been bought. The population of Ulster Unionists in the north did not want Home Rule under any circumstances. They regarded it as Rome Rule, and they formed an armed force of many thousands of people to resist it. They also signed a covenant, the Ulster Covenant, which will be commemorated later this year, on the anniversary of it, where most of the Ulster population of the north signed up to say they would oppose Home Rule by any means necessary. In 1913, we have the biggest struggle in the Irish Labour movement, the lockout of 1913. James Larkin, who was the Labour leader in Dublin at the time, started for the first time to organise unskilled workers into trade unions. And I know trade unions have a bad name in all kinds of places these days, but they are historically one of the great civic society organisations that give people a democratic chance to represent themselves and to look after their terms and conditions of work. So this is a landmark moment, and of course it's resisted tooth and nail by the employers in the city, who do not want people negotiating about their working hours or their wages or any of those things that concern employers in general. So there's a lockout for 8 months. There's absolute shenanigans all over the place. There are ships coming in from Britain with food to feed people who are starving. There's a soup kitchen in Liberty Hall down on the river where workers come to get fed. There was no strike pay, of course, so they were destitute. And no national insurance payments for people who are on strike. So they lose that battle and drift back to work, but they win the war in the sense that it vastly increases the membership of the trade union movement. So starting from a low point in 1911, about 5,000 members. By the time we get to 1918, the trade union movement was 150,000 members, and it was that clash, that battle, that allowed that to happen. 1914, the outbreak of World War I, probably the most cataclysmic thing that happened in all of this time, although buried as part of our history for a long time after independence. So you have approximately 220,000 young Irishmen who go to fight on the front in World War I. They're encouraged